Good morning to all of you, and welcome to all of you who are joining us online. As you can see on the screen, if you can see it at home and you can see it here, we're involved in a biblical archaeology journey, and we're hoping you can dig it. We're hoping you can dig it. Go ahead and turn your Bibles, if you will, to Genesis chapter 6. We're going to start there this morning. And then we're going to keep your finger in Genesis, because then we're going to go to Genesis 13, and Doug's going to read for us. And then we're going a little bit later on to another chapter in Genesis. But we just want to see what happened here, and I think all of you, we are all pretty aware of what happened in Genesis chapter 6, but it kind of leads us into the story of Sodom and Gomorrah here, because earlier in Genesis, we know that this took place. Genesis 6. Join me in reading, if you will. And it came to pass, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were fair, and they took wives of all they desired and chose. And the Lord said, My spirit shall not forever dwell and strive with man, for he also is flesh, but his days shall be 120 years. There were giants in the earth in those days, and soon afterward, when the sons of God lived with the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. And these were the mighty men who were of old, men of renown. The Lord saw that the wickedness, here we go, here's what we want to read. The Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination and intention of all human thinking was only evil continually. And the Lord regretted that he had made man on the earth, and he was grieved at heart. And the Lord said, I will destroy, blot out, and wipe away mankind, whom I have created from the face of the ground. Not only man, but the beasts of the creeping things and the birds of the air. For it grieves me and makes me regretful that I have made them. But Noah found grace in the eyes, found favor in the eyes of the Lord. So this is Genesis chapter 6, and we're going to leap ahead to Genesis 13, because today's lesson, if you look at week number 7 on the screen, week number 7, the name of the lesson is Hot Stuff. It's about Tell a Mom, and really, as far as Sodom and Gomorrah is concerned, it's regarding what we would refer to as the Sodom and Gomorrah region, which you will be seeing about. I have condensed a 68-page technical work into 30 minutes. So I think you're going to find this kind of compelling if you've never seen some of the background behind Sodom and Gomorrah, but there's a little work that we have to do first of all. And I understand that we're kind of underway with replacing these projectors in here so that they're brighter, and we're going to see if we can't get shades up over here on these windows so we don't torture people in the morning. John Denver had a wonderful song, you know, Sunshine on My Shoulders, but it's not so good when you're trying to look at a screen to make out some things, but I'll try and help out here this morning. This is a really busy map, and just before Doug reads to us, I want to talk about, kind of get our area fixed, our setting as to where we're going to be talking about here. So you're going to hear, and in fact in the news unfortunately in the news in the last week, just north of this area, there's a lot of turmoil going on in Gaza. And you can actually see Gaza right here on the map. And Doug will read to us and tell us how the blue line is the one that we want to be concerned with here. The Negev, this is the Negev, but it's the Negev. It's this area which is now northern Egypt, and you can see that Gaza is right above that. This blue line is where Abram came out of Egypt, and tells about that he and Lot met at this city up here, between these two cities, Bethel and Ai. So the towns of, and I can't even hardly read it up here, the towns in this region northwest of the Dead Sea are Admah, Gomorrah, Sodom, and Zeboim, located here in this area. What do you suppose this area looks like in this day and time? Pardon me? Salty? Indeed. I'll show you in just a second. But there's a meeting that takes place between Abram and Lot in Genesis 13 here, and there's a decision that's made. Now, Doug, I'm going to stop in a couple of places. Don't get angry with me, okay? All right. I'm going to stop you in a couple of places so we can see something. Well, this is what the area looks like. This is looking out over the north side of the Dead Sea and the area surrounding it. Do you see any plant life or anything growing out there? Here's another picture on the left of what it looks like in this area. And we'll talk more about that. I'm going to go back to the other slide here if I can get back to it in just a second. So, Doug, I want you, although my slides are a little out of order here, Genesis 13, if you would move to there, and let's read this story together as far as Genesis 13. And I'm going to stop you, Doug, okay? Go ahead. Genesis 13.
So Abram went up from Egypt to the Negev with his wife and everything he had, and Lot went with him. Abram had become very wealthy in livestock and in silver and gold. From the Negev he went from place to place until he came to Bethel, to the place between Bethel and Ai, where his tent had been earlier and where he had first built an altar. There Abram called on the name of the Lord. Now Lot, who was moving about with Abram, also had flocks and herds and tents. But the land could not support them while they stayed together, for their possessions were so great that they were not able to stay together. And quarreling arose between Abram's herders and Lot's. The Canaanites and Perizzites were also living in the land at that time.
Hold on, Doug. So if we translate that as far as the who, Doug, the Canaanites and the Perizzites, the Perizzites or the Perizzites?
Perizzites.
Perizzites.
Or Perizzites.
Okay, Perizzites. Do you know who those people are today? Part of them. They're called Palestinians. So just remember that, okay?
So Abram said to Lot, "Let's not have any quarreling between you and me, or between your herders and mine, for we are close relatives. Is not the whole land before you? Let's part company. If you go to the left, I'll go to the right. If you go to the right, I'll go to the left." Lot looked around and saw that the whole plain of the Jordan toward Zoar was well watered, like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt.
Hold on. Would you read that again, Doug?
The whole plain of the Jordan toward Zoar was well watered, like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt.
Something happened, did it not? Something happened. Now, comparing it to the Nile or the Garden of Eden, what you would expect to see, everybody in here is probably familiar with an oasis, right? Lots of palm trees, very verdant green with all of the plant life that's growing and that type of thing. And we'll actually see when we get to the paper here in a little bit what happened over the next several hundred years in this area. So it's not like it was back when Lot first looked at it. So Lot picked it because of its richness, because of the verdant growth that was there, and the ability, at one time they know that this was a very, very verdant region as far as agricultural growth and that type of thing. Okay, still in Genesis 13.
This was before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. So Lot chose for himself the whole plain of the Jordan and set out toward the east. The two men parted company. Abram lived in the land of Canaan, while Lot lived among the cities of the plain and pitched his tents near Sodom. Now the people of Sodom were wicked and were sinning greatly against the Lord. The Lord said to Abram after Lot had parted from him, "Look around from where you are, to the north and south, to the east and west. All the land that you see I will give to you and your offspring forever. I will make your offspring like the dust of the earth, so that if anyone could count the dust, then your offspring could be counted. Go, walk through the length and breadth of the land, for I am giving it to you." So Abram went to live near the great trees of Mamre at Hebron, where he pitched his tents. There he built an altar to the Lord.
Okay, so just what Doug and what you just read in your Bibles, this is Hebron. And if you look right down here at this end right here, we're going to see someone that escapes to Zoar. So this is Zoar at this part of the Dead Sea. So Lot decided that he would take this area that was well watered and a beautiful place compared to the Garden of Eden. And Abram took all of the countryside in this area up here that you see as Canaan displayed on the map. So this is what it looked like. Something has changed, and something is going to change. So let's go to Genesis 19, and let's read there right quick to see what happened. Go ahead, Doug.
The two angels arrived at Sodom in the evening, and Lot was sitting in the gateway of the city. When he saw them, he got up to meet them and bowed down with his face to the ground. "My lords," he said, "please turn aside to your servant's house. You can wash your feet, spend the night, and then go on your way early in the morning." "No," they answered, "we will spend the night in the square." But he insisted so strongly that they did go with him and entered his house. He prepared a meal for them, baking bread without yeast, and they ate. Before they had gone to bed, all the men from every part of the city of Sodom, both young and old, surrounded the house. They called to Lot, "Where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us so that we can have sex with them." Lot went outside to meet them and shut the door behind him and said, "No, my friends, don't do this wicked thing. Look, I have two daughters who have never slept with a man. Let me bring them out to you, and you can do what you like with them. But don't do anything to these men, for they have come under the protection of my roof." "Get out of our way," they replied. "This fellow came here as a foreigner, and now he wants to play the judge. We'll treat you worse than them." They kept bringing pressure on Lot and moved forward to break down the door. But the men inside reached out and pulled Lot back into the house and shut the door. Then they struck the men who were at the door of the house, young and old, with blindness, so that they could not find the door. The two men said to Lot, "Do you have anyone else here? Sons-in-law, sons or daughters, or anyone else in the city who belongs to you? Get them out of here, because we are going to destroy this place. The outcry to the Lord against its people is so great that he has sent us to destroy it."
So hold on just a second, Doug. So just from what we've just read here, do you kind of get a picture of how much evil there was in this place? We know that in what we read earlier in Genesis chapter 6 that the Lord dealt with this with water beforehand and wiped out the people and everything that was on the earth at the time. Here we see this evil on full display. And although it might make you shudder a little bit about some of the things that are going on in our world today, right here in Houston, just about everywhere, right? And we'll see how the Lord deals with that again here in just a little bit. Go ahead, Doug.
So Lot went out and spoke to his sons-in-law, who were pledged to marry his daughters. He said, "Hurry and get out of this place, because the Lord is about to destroy the city." But his sons-in-law thought he was joking. With the coming of dawn, the angels urged Lot, saying, "Hurry, take your wife and your two daughters who are here, or you will be swept away when the city is punished." When he hesitated, the men grasped his hand and the hands of his wife and of his 2 daughters and led them safely out of the city, for the Lord was merciful to them. As soon as they had brought them out, one of them said, "Flee for your lives. Don't look back and don't stop anywhere in the plain. Flee to the mountains or you will be swept away." But Lot said to them, "No, my lords, please. Your servant has found favor in your eyes, and you have shown great kindness to me in sparing my life. But I can't flee to the mountains. This disaster will overtake me, and I'll die. Look, here is a town near enough to run to, and it is small. Let me flee to it. It is very small, isn't it? Then my life will be spared." He said to him, "Very well, I will grant this request too. I will not overthrow the town you speak of, but flee there quickly, because I cannot do anything until you reach it." That is why the town was called Zoar. By the time Lot reached Zoar, the sun had risen over the land. Then the Lord rained down burning sulfur on Sodom and Gomorrah from the Lord out of the heavens. Thus he overthrew those cities and the entire plain, destroying all those living in the cities and also the vegetation in the land. But Lot's wife looked back, and she became a pillar of salt. Early the next morning, Abraham got up and returned to the place where he had stood before the Lord. He looked down toward Sodom and Gomorrah, toward all the land of the plain, and he saw dense smoke rising from the land like smoke from a furnace. So when God destroyed the cities of the plain, he remembered Abraham, and he brought Lot out of the catastrophe that overthrew the cities where Lot had lived.
Okay, so Doug just read for us, Zoar actually means little place in Hebrew. So apparently these cities were in this area right here, the ones that had to endure this brimstone and sulfur, and Lot was allowed to go to Zoar. Now that probably would So again, you look at the region, what it looks like in this day and time, and you have to realize this was 3,000 years ago. So there's been some erosion and that type of thing that's happened from the temporary rains that they get and that type of thing. That's why you see on the left side all of those what look like crevices and valleys and those types of things. On the right is kind of interesting. Doug, if you would remind us all just a minute, what came down from heaven? What did you read? Burning sulfur, brimstone, and fire, right? Well, if you look, this is actually a picture. If you went into the side of one of those canyons and looked in the wall, you see in this ash that there are just literally thousands of embedded, I guess we would call them a farm term, a clod. There is a clod, there's a clods of sulfur everywhere in this region. And you can actually go in and dig out these clods of sulfur. Sulfur, everybody here knows what color sulfur is, right? It's yellow or gold. Sulfur melts at 240 degrees F. It boils at 832 degrees F. It's very flammable. It will burn very easily. It burns when you burn it with a bright blue flame. There has never been, and this is annotated in the paper that follows, but in this area there has never been volcanic activity. So you could say that this is ash, but there's an 8 to 20 foot depth of ash here that covers 30 square miles of area. Now remember what I said, there's no volcanic activity that's ever been recorded in history in this area. So this ash had to come from someplace. So now the rest of this is going to be, I mentioned to you last week that we're going to try and prove to you that something kind of different happened here. And I want you to make up your own mind. So this is the paper. Now, Tunguska, don't worry about that. That's not a biblical term. I'll tell you about that in just a minute. Tunguska-sized airburst destroyed this area, which includes Tal el Hammam, Again, a tal is one of those tells, what we know as a tell. Tal is that in what the Islamic people use as far as the Arabic. Tal el-Hammam, which was a Middle Bronze Age city in the Jordan Valley near the Dead Sea. The author of this paper, you can see the things there. This information is put in for the AI goofuses that are out there that are looking for something that you might be infringing a copyright. I went and got the license for this to be able to use this in this presentation. So what you see annotated there is this work is licensed under Creative Commons, and we have the ability to look at it here, but we have to stay exactly true to what is mentioned in the paper. And so what you're going to see on these pictures is, and you're welcome to go research this. It's in Nature and Science magazine. But there's 68 pages of extreme data here regarding scientific methodologies that they use to basically, where I'm going to take you into all these layers and where they got down to 2000 BC when about this happened, how they got down into these layers, and you're going to see the results of what come from all these layers, okay? So this is the abstract of the paper. I'm going to read it just exactly as it came from the paper because that's what I'm supposed to do under this license, okay? So read along with me, if you will, on the screen. We present evidence in this paper that in 1650 BC, around, that's what that little squiggle mark means there, is around 1650 BC. This would actually, I see a 400-year discrepancy in the radiocarbon dating here. Now, I don't know what happens for radiocarbon dating whenever you have things that we're going to look at in a little bit that have been subjected to greater than 3,500 degrees F. 3,500 degrees F, which is what they found. I don't know what that does as far as radiocarbon dating, but they think it's 1650 BC based on that. A cosmic airburst destroyed Tel el-Hammam, a middle-aged bronze city in the southern Jordan Valley, northeast of the Dead Sea. Now listen closely. The proposed airburst was larger than the 1908 explosion over Tunguska, Russia. Now they're comparing this because the scientists did a lot of work at Tunguska, Russia to determine the effects of a cosmic airburst in that area. Where a 50 meter bolide, which is a big round rock like a meteorite or a small asteroid, detonated with 1,000 times more energy than the Hiroshima atomic bomb. Now what they have found, I'll just condense this and get right to the base, they found that what happened here over the Dead Sea was more powerful than what Tunguska was. So, happening over the Dead Sea. So a citywide, this would say about Tel el-Hammam, 1.5 meter thick carbon and ash-rich destruction layer contains concentrations of all these things: quartz, melted pottery, show you pictures of it, mud bricks, diamond-like carbon. Did any of you ladies have diamonds on this morning? No? Your husbands are here, they're cheapskates. No. Do you have any diamonds on? We're talking about diamondoids. We're talking about enough heat to turn carbon into diamonds that they found in this region. Melted plaster, melted platinum, all of these elements that you can see here in compounds. Heating experiments indicate temperatures exceeded 2,000 degrees C. So if you do the calculation, it's over 3,500 degrees F. Amid city-side devastation, should be citywide devastation, the airburst demolished 12 plus meters of the 4 to 5 story palace complex and a massive 4 meter thick mud brick rampart, which is a wall on the outside, causing extreme disarticulation and skeletal fragmentation in nearby humans. We'll show you some of those here in just a little bit. An airburst-related influx of salt, approximately 4 weight% salt, produced hypersalinity. That means everything was really salty. Inhibited agriculture and caused a 300 to 600 year-long abandonment of approximately 120 regional settlements within a 25-kilometer radius. That would be about 15-mile radius, 30-mile diameter as far as the circle is concerned. Tel el-Hammam may be the second oldest city town destroyed by a cosmic airburst, an impact There was another one in Syria, and possibly the earliest site with an oral tradition. Here you go. Now this is scientific lingo for it's in the Bible. That was written down in Genesis. Tunguska scale airbursts, of course, here's some more scientific lingo for you, can devastate entire cities and regions and thus pose a severe modern-day hazard. Really? I'd be scared if I was in San Francisco. And a lot of other places. There could be some cosmic-sized airbursts that might take place. Okay, so just to give you an idea of where this is, Tel El-Amam is here, this side of the Dead Sea. This is the southern part of Israel, Negev in these days. See Jordan, Saudi Arabia down here, Iraq up here. This is the Tel El-Amam, the Tel where they were actually doing the digging. They dug into an area that had a palace, and the palace was, this is one of the areas that they dug into, 170-foot width by 90-foot height. And if you can see that, if you note the construction materials, and this is kind of interesting because, remember, this is 3,000 years ago, right? This is basically 2000 BC. You have a wall that's on the outside, and you'll see this, MB2 in a lot of this. This is Middle Bronze Age 2 in that particular time era. There is a sheared wall here, there's a foundation wall here, and a sheared wall. Now, why do I mention about the sheared wall? I'll show you a little bit more about that in a little bit, but you have sheared walls where you had a tremendous airburst and you had wind that swept over with debris and basically coned out the top of the wall. It took the material off of the stone as all that debris was rushing over it. Okay, these are the layers that you see, and this is the blowover of the debris after apparently the explosion had taken place, the plaster, the top of the debris. Each of these marks on these, you'll see these in all types of archaeological digs. This is 10 centimeters, 10 centimeters, 10 centimeters. So this is the depth that's involved here. This was in the area of the destroyed multi-storied palace. It's the jumbled rubble on palace, the top floor one. Number one represents mud bricks and debris from shattered upper walls. Mud bricks. So let's go back to when the Israelites were captive in Egypt. What was one of their main jobs that we read about in Genesis? What were they making? Mud bricks, right? And what I'm going to show you are some photos, some micrographs here in a little bit of showing how they made those mud bricks that they've actually taken out here. So this was a common building material back during the time were mud bricks. But the blowover is again a portion of that wall where all that debris come blowing over. And the blowover in blue, wherever that is, can you see the blue? Oh, there it is, the blowover in blue. Marks fragments of white limestone plaster, that's calcium carbonate, mixed with carbonate spherules from the palace walls. So 3,600 years, a lot of things covered this up to basically protect it. Here are a few things in the destruction layer in the palace. If you look, there's different layers that are annotated up here where they've dug down into this area. And by the way, all of these areas that are up above this, all of these have been dug out, taken to the laboratory, and they've carbon dated all of these areas. So they know that the area that they're in here, where they're actually looking down in here at this area, was around that time frame. This is all debris. This is a clay floor. Interestingly, in that area, these are broken pots, and there are charcoal inside of them. Now I'll show you. Does anybody in here do ceramics? Has anybody ever fired something for ceramic pots? Boy, y'all are a boring group. Nobody in here has ever done ceramics? You have? What is the firing temperature for ceramics? 3,600? About the same here then. And why do you fire ceramics ceramic pots. Get all the moisture out and make them hard, right? Okay, so that they hold liquid and that type of thing, and it doesn't go out through the pores, right? So here you've got pots that they removed in this area, and these, you can see the deformation on the pots, and here you have charred palace roof material, and it's actually the logs and things that they put in, and this is all coming from this same area of that time frame. Middle Bronze Age 2, around this very similar time frame as far as 2,000 years ago. Okay, so here's some of the pottery that they've taken. Now, I'll leave it up to you as to whether some cataclysmic, really hot event took place or not. These are some of the, this is some of the pottery that they removed northeast of the palace. This is the inside. Same piece on B, the outside. Down in the lower part of the tall, in a different area, this is the inside of the pottery, and this is the outside of the pottery. Now, what would you say happened to that? Yeah, and I mean, the heat was so intense that it pitted it, right? And there's other things that are down here, and they're actually showing, this is a, I don't know if anybody in here has ever worked with a scanning electron microscope. We use it in our business, but it's what you call an SEM. And it goes down to very fine magnifications, and I mean, you can see very small things beyond what a typical microscope can see. But they're actually taking pictures. That's 750 micron. That's about 3 times what your human hair is. Human hair is about 200 microns in diameter. So this is 750 microns, and they're just showing all of this pitted structure that is in this pottery that's taken place because of the intense heat. Here's some of the roofing material, and this is where it gets a little bit interesting as far as the destruction of these. And if you read through the paper, you're going to find that there's an awful lot of what they call melt clay. And melt clay is like the clay that's used in pottery. Melt clay is where it's actually been, the granules have been melted together, pretty much like firing ceramics, right? So that's what happened to a lot of the clay that was involved on the roof. Notice their construction to where they would have layers of clay, they would have wood beams in between, and then down below for the walls they would use, guess what? Mud bricks, right? Very typical because we know that from Egypt. So here you can see what they're demonstrating here in B and C. You see these holes in this mud brick and the roofing clay as well. There's tubular holes that are in here. And that's actually where the straw was embedded, and it burned the straw out in those holes, and you can actually see them to when they were making the mud bricks. Remember, there was something about Pharaoh took away the straw and made it harder for them to make mud bricks. Well, anyway, similar type of construction going on here. And interestingly enough, there are things like leaf prints. This is a photomicrograph of one segment of the roofing material that has a leaf imprint. So they would lay down clay, and then they would get leaves and put on top of that another layer of clay, leaves, and that type of thing, and put it down. And there's actually photomicrographs of, this is the SEM, and this is the opposite side of that. Is Glenn Addison, you're here this morning? Good, because I need you in just a second. I just was curious if you recognize this guy. Stand up and take a look up there. Do you recognize this fellow? Little dark humor for you. Sorry. For those of you who don't know, visiting with us, Glenn is an undertaker, okay? He runs a funeral business. In this layer, and these little round things that you see here, the skull is embedded in pulverized mud brick. And This is one portion of the skull, and I should just read this. A is a photo of a disarticulated skull found near the palace on the Ring Road on the upper area. The right eye socket has been crushed, the orange area. Skull is embedded in pulverized mud brick containing numerous charcoal fragments, yellow circles, stained with ash, commonly found in the destruction area. The orange tint of the skull suggests it was exposed to temperatures greater than 392 degrees. And you see in B a rear view of the same skull. All of the yellow circles that you see on there are charcoal fragments. And then C, you see the lower torso of the same body from the ring road to the lower tall, orange arrows, and other disarticulated bones. Disarticulated means spread apart, right? Disarticulated bones. They show evidence of being burned where the ribs are, and the rest of the skeleton is dismembered and disarticulated. If you look at the toes, the hyperflexed toes, the purple arrow, are consistent with either perimortem during the death or postmortem after death exposure to high temperatures. So in the same area they found, and there were other areas where they found a lot of other bones that are in this area. Now let me just mention something. It's kind of interesting because when they go into these sites, they're looking at other causal factors that could have caused this extreme catastrophic event. They're looking for arrowheads. They're looking for something as far as warfare. We know that fires are set in warfare and that type of thing. In this layer, they have found no stone arrowheads, nothing that would indicate that there was actually a war procedure that went on to cause this. So let me just ask you, when you see all of this, does it tell us that something catastrophic happened here? It looked like it was really hot. Does it not? So, something else that's kind of interesting about this region, and I know a lot of us in here have been to Israel. We talk about the 16 cities of the plain, covering 26% of the southern Jordan Valley, which are the colorized areas which mark modern-day salinity concentrations of greater than 1.3%. So greater than 1.3% means that it's considered lethal for many domestic food crops. Tel El Hammam, which is TEH right here, was the next largest with the smaller towns in blue. The dashed red oval line indicates the extent of this event. What is known over there as the Kikar, known as the Disk of the Jordan. All 16 major settled sites and greater than 100 villages in the southern Jordan Valley appear to have been abandoned, imagine that, at 1650 BC, which is their dating. Jericho was minimally resettled approximately 300 years after the destruction event. Tal Nimran, which I believe is on here, Nimrin, right here, was resettled approximately 500 years later, and Tel Hammam was reoccupied 600 years later. So if you have an event like this where there's a large explosion and it happens over the Dead Sea, wouldn't you expect that there's salt that's covered over quite an area? So that's probably what happened. And the places become, let me just articulate this a little bit. Because the ground was not able for use as far as agriculture, the people just couldn't go back in because they couldn't grow anything, they couldn't live there, right? So this whole region and all of these cities were basically uninhabited for all of these years. Now, how do they know that? Well, they went in and did excavations at many of the cities that surround this area and basically see that there's a blank. There is a blank area showing no occupation for that time period. So what's the lesson for us? I mean, the evidence is pretty clear that there was a catastrophic event. We read about it in Genesis. We know this, right? That happened because of the sinfulness of human beings. But there's a message for us in the New Testament about this as well. Doug, you want to read it for us?
But there were also false prophets among the people, just as there will be false teachers among you. They will secretly introduce destructive heresies, even denying the sovereign Lord who bought them, bringing swift destruction on themselves. Many will follow their depraved conduct and will bring the way of truth into disrepute. In their greed, these teachers will exploit you with fabricated stories. Their condemnation has long been hanging over them, and their destruction has not been sleeping. For if God did not spare angels when they sinned, but sent them to hell, putting them in chains of darkness to be held for judgment, if he did not spare the ancient world when he brought the flood on its ungodly people, but protected Noah, a preacher of righteousness, and 7 others, if he condemned the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah by burning them to ashes and made them an example of what is going to happen to the ungodly, and if he rescued Lot, a righteous man who was distressed by the depraved conduct of the lawless, for that righteous man, living among them day after day, was tormented in his righteous soul by the lawless deeds he saw and heard. If this is so, then the Lord knows how to rescue the godly from trials and to hold the unrighteous for punishment on the day of judgment. This is especially true of those who follow the corrupt desire of the flesh and despise authority.
So what's the lesson for us? If this is true, what is the lesson for us? Pardon me? Trust God? Pardon me? Walk in the light, not in the heat.
Don't cave in to all of the pressure that's put on us, because our country right now is pushing its agenda, and there's more and more attacks on those who don't buy into it.
Yeah, in 2 Peter was talking to people, was talking about false teachers and their destruction, right? Do we have any false teachers in this day and time? Yes, we do. God bless you. Thanks for being here.